All right. Thank you guys so much for joining us tonight for the book launch for Edgardo Giménez, One of a Kind. I'm really excited about this publication, which is a co-publication with Fundación and MALBA in Buenos Aires, that has been the fruit of many years of work, particularly by my colleague who is not able to join us tonight, Blanca Serrano. And before beginning, I'm just going to give you a quick run of show. We're going to have a lovely presentation by Christina de León, who's here on my right, as well as Gonzalo Guerrero and Tara Ridgedell of Secret Riso Club. And after that, we'll open up to the audience for Q&A for any questions that you guys might have. Before we begin, I'll also say a few words of introduction for our speakers. Christina L. de León is the acting deputy director of curatorial and the associate curator of Latino Design at Cooper Hewitt Smithsonian Design Museum. At the museum, she's responsible for researching and collecting U.S., Latinx, and Latin American design, as well as developing exhibitions, educational programs, and digital content that raises greater awareness of design from the Americas. From 2010 to 2016, de León was associate curator at Americas Society, where she worked on exhibitions and publications focused on modern and contemporary Latin American art. She previously held positions at the Metropolitan Museum of Art and the Met Cloisters. De León received a BA from Hobart and William Smith Colleges, an MA from New York University, and is currently a doctoral candidate at Bard Graduate Center. Thank you for joining us, Christina. And Secret Riso Club, of which Gonzalo and Tara are the collaborators, is a graphic design and risograph studio that focuses on the intersection of social justice, art, design, and community building. Forgive me. In their practice, they work to build a platform that serves as a collaborative space for developing ideas and new projects. Secret Riso Club is run in collaboration by Gonzalo and Tara. Sorry, I front-loaded that. Before turning it over to Christina, I also want to thank, again, our presenters for such enduring engagement with Edgardo's practice. For those of you who are joining us tonight, Edgardo is an Argentine artist, graphic designer, scenographer, architect extraordinaire, who's worked for over 6 decades, and the publication that we have in the back is a really special retrospective look at his practice. So I hope you will all page through that before you leave. Christina has been so wonderful in stewarding his work at the Cooper Hewitt, accepting that gift from ISLAA and making sure that it saw a lot of attention in the past few years. And Gonzalo, earlier this year, spoke with Edgardo in an interview that's now online on ISLAA's website. I hope you guys will take a peek at that. And I've been so grateful for Gonzalo and Tara's extended engagement with Edgardo through this beautiful collage kit, which is free and available at the back of the room for all of you to take home, and will also be on ISLAA's website for download and printout and continued engagement. So thank you guys so much for being here and for, my pleasure. Now, without further ado, Christina, take it away.
Hello, everyone. I want to begin by thanking ISLAA for inviting me to take part in this exciting book launch, and to Nicole Kuck for her work in coordinating my participation this evening. As Nicole mentioned, I joined Cooper Hewitt Smithsonian Design Museum in 2017 as its inaugural curator of Latino design, and one of my many mandates was to build the collection that represented the diverse design perspectives and creative outputs by designers and artists active throughout the Americas, a very tall order for an institution that had ignored the region for decades. From the start, I knew 20th century design from Latin America would be an important addition to the permanent collection. As an institution with an incredible history of showcasing graphic design, it was really imperative that Cooper Hewitt represent Latin America within a larger global discussion of design innovation. So I was really thrilled that in 2021, we received this generous gift from ISLAA of 24 important graphic works designed by the Argentine artist Edgardo Giménez. Using many of the examples represented in this group, tonight I'll give a brief overview of this prolific artist who pushed the boundaries of art, design, and architecture to develop a unique practice that proves, as the title of this book states, Edgardo Giménez is truly one of a kind. Born in Santa Fe, Argentina, Giménez is undoubtedly one of the country's most dynamic and accomplished artists of his generation. While I'll mostly focus on his graphic design, he worked in an array of mediums and scales throughout his career, producing paintings, sculptures, posters, product design, film, theatrical sets, fashion, and architectural structures. As the book so adeptly shows, the diversity of this creative production is so profound and vast, it's hard to believe that one person was able to produce so much and accomplish such a diverse output of work throughout his lifetime. I say this to bring to light the fact that for Giménez, his skill and creativity had no bounds. And his ability to work in such a confident and fearless manner is what ultimately shaped his singular career. Giménez's work represents a range of techniques, aesthetic sensibilities, and cultural events that bear witness to the experimental and counterculture movements that transpired in Buenos Aires. One of the many achievements of this book is the visual documentation of how Giménez utilized graphic design to seamlessly weave together his interest in art, design, performance, popular culture, and consumerism throughout his 50-year career. Giménez's posters stand as a testament to Argentina's thriving artist community of the 1960s and 1970s, before the country's military dictatorship and dirty war imposed a cultural blackout that repressed artistic expression. His advertisements for these cultural events are the vestiges of vanguard art exhibitions, dance performances, and art happenings and theatrical shows. Not only do many of the posters speak to how international artistic trends such as pop art, psychedelia, new abstraction, kinetic art, and postmodernism circulated in the region, but it reveals how Giménez interpreted these styles to produce a new communication language that appealed to or even scandalized Argentine society. Giménez began training at the young age of 13 in an advertising agency where he gained drawing and graphic design skills, an experience that would lay the foundation for the rest of his career. It's clear this experience not only provided Giménez with the ability to tap into the public consciousness, but to express the dynamism of contemporary Argentine culture. By the 1960s, Giménez emerged as the poster maker of artists and intellectuals, creating posters for events such as gallery exhibitions and theatrical productions. The results were bold, black and white compositions that in some cases did not even depict the artist's work for the promotion of their gallery exhibition, but nevertheless provided an image that represented excitement, humor, allure, and sometimes even mystery. Pictured here are two wonderful examples of exhibition posters for Argentine artists, David Lamelas and Elena Monasterios. In both cases, he employs unconventional portraits of the artist to draw the viewer in. For instance, in Lamelas' poster, you can see Giménez used a solarized photo of him surrounded by the repetition of a tango singer around his face to create an image of a sun, perhaps an allusion to the sun found in the Argentine flag, but certainly all of these elements together served as familiar visual clues for the public. Giménez's work during this period is characterized by its clever use of photomontage, composition, and typography to produce imagery that was modern and unconventional, but defied the pretension of the art world. He recognized the power of a daring image and its ability to incite curiosity, an effective tool he employed often. In this poster for Alberto Jara's exhibition of paintings and drawings, he was not afraid to bring the drama. And for the poster Danza, Primera Aproximación, Giménez created an abstracted dancing figure with multiple limbs to represent the body in motion. A beam of light serves as both the head of the figure and a reference to the spotlight of the stage. I especially love the eye at the center, which immediately focuses the viewer onto this figure, but also speaks to them as a potential spectator of the show. Giménez was a central figure within the Argentine pop art scene, becoming a member of the Instituto Torcuato Di Tela, an influential cultural center for the Argentinian avant-garde. In fact, in 1967, he was invited to take part in the exhibition Experiencias Visuales by Jorge Romero Brest, the director of the Centro de Artes Visuales of the Di Tela, which would mark the beginning of his long relationship with this influential critic. Giménez's interest in pop art from the United States and his adept use of color and translation of that aesthetic for an Argentine context would be a defining aspect of his career. In this poster for a poem from the series Por Siempre Ameba, which you see here on your right, your left, the red and green one. Giménez uses a graphic pop art vocabulary mixed with bold, flat color planes to produce a whimsical composition with an illusion of depth. Humor is also a hallmark of Giménez's work, particularly with posters made to publicize his solo gallery exhibitions, where he used his own image in daring and unabashed ways. While using the image of the artist to promote an exhibition was not a new strategy for Giménez, he definitely exploited his self-image in a pioneering way. He was as much the art as the work he produced. In Edgardo Giménez, Las Panteras Objetos, he is pictured in boxer shorts riding a panther. He was an excellent self-promoter and understood how to grab the public's attention by producing audacious imagery meant to stun and challenge social norms. In the book, Maria Jose Herrera uses a really great quote by Jorge Romero Brest to introduce her essay, which I think is a wonderful summary of Giménez. He says, quote, "Have I ever known anyone quite this self-assured? It's all one to him, whether he's building a house, designing a garden, planning a publicity spot, or creating a film set, objects, or posters. In each case, his eagle eye, if eagles really are sharp-sighted, lets him see in nature and in people what others don't see. And with an equally deft hand and clear head, he determines the form as if it were play, or more precisely, as he plays. Because if life couldn't be a game, he couldn't bear it," end quote. And speaking of self-confidence, in this presentation card advertising his services as a graphic designer and scenographer, he placed himself under a rainbow dressed in a leather jockstrap and harness. As the book states, quote, "He immersed himself in the cult of his image, a blatant attitude of provocation and exaltation of universal principles." And I'll just say that I often show this to students when we're looking at different types of graphic design from the region, and it's really great to take this and break it down, not just looking at Giménez, obviously wearing this, jockstrap, but looking at the font, looking at his use of the composition of his figure on top of the rainbow arc, really breaking down something as simple as a presentation card could be so bold, so innovative, so different, for 1970 in Argentina, and thinking about that in a critical way. What was he trying to say about himself as an artist, as a person, as a designer? Obviously not just a designer, so much more than that. And so you knew when you hired Edgardo Giménez, you were hiring Edgardo Giménez, like a very specific type of person. And he brought all of that into the work. He was also very much unafraid to present images that spoke to sexuality or his identity as a queer man, as seen in these postcards created for the shop, etc. Here you have love hearts and love butterfly. What is particularly interesting about Giménez, at least I think, is that despite his role in the avant-garde art scene, he was very much attuned to consumer culture, a quality that no doubt came from the fact that he was a self-trained artist and he spent his formative years working in advertising. At the age of 19, he opened a store called La Oveja Boba, opened from 1963 to 1966, that sold a variety of objects for the home. Then La Mordedura Tierna, from 1964 to 1966, and finally Fuera de Caja from 1969 to 1972. Of his interest in these commercial pursuits, he said, quote, "You can transform any object into an artistic object. Living with beautiful objects will alter your life, will make it more rewarding for you, and will help you develop an aesthetic consciousness. Not everyone has access to a painting," end quote. He opened Fuera de Caja Centro de Arte para Consumir in 1969, together with Marta Botempi, Jorge Romero Brest, and Raquel Edelman, as a storefront gallery that sold artist-designed objects produced by manufacturers for everyday life. The designs represented here differed greatly from that championed by the pioneering Argentine designer and educator Tomás Maldonado, who adopted a systems thinking approach that embodied both art and science for industrially produced products. Fuera de Caja sat very much outside of this established ideology. Though the main focus were objects and furniture pieces by Giménez, the store also sold accessories by Cancela Mesajon, textiles by Nini Gomez, silkscreen prints by Lea Lublin, wall hangings by Marta Minujín, and costume jewelry by Susana Salgado, among others. And here are two wonderful photos of the store, one of Giménez with Marta Minujín, and another where you can see the variety of goods sold in the store in the background. But besides the objects that were sold at Fuera de Caja, I'm really fascinated by the posters he designed to advertise the store, and also the packaging that he created for the store seen here. In this series, Giménez's command of vibrant colors and his penchant for psychedelia are on full display. But more importantly, he knows how to use striking, relatable imagery that appeal to a mass public as a means to promote sales. He really was a master at that, and I think his ability to be very connected to familiar images like those found in nature, folk art, things that people would immediately be able to recognize without necessarily having a degree or studying art, could easily understand was really a genius move, and something that he really stood by for most of his career. It's also intriguing to see how he uses a similar vocabulary for the clothing designs that he created. One of the parts of the book that I really liked was seeing the various types of things he designed throughout his life, and the clothing was a real highlight for me. And when I saw, these images, next to those from Fuera de Caja, you really begin to see the way in which he's using these different types of images in a variety of ways, which can transform anything from, a box design to something as simple as a vest into an object that's very unique and different, and also really striking. The other thing that I think is very interesting about Giménez is his use of repeated motifs, such as something as simple as the star. And you see this in posters for gallery exhibitions that are promoting his shows. But I also really like the way in which the designers of the book have used elements like the star throughout the design to sort of pay homage to some of those elements. And also another thing that's very interesting is his use of the head in profile. Here are 3 different examples from 3 different decades that show his evolution of the use of the head. And what I think is so interesting here is that in each decade, it feels like, you know, very of that moment, but it's using such a simple idea of a head in profile and in a really dynamic and bold, through a really dynamic and bold gesture. Posters, what I think is also really fascinating and I think really critical when you think about Giménez and his career is that he didn't stay static by no means. He was very aware of evolving global aesthetic trends, and his response to new stylistic currents in art and design was super clear and something that he employed throughout the decades in which he worked. In the 80s, postmodernism's influence is clearly demonstrated in his graphic design for the dance performance Caminantes, Grupo de Danza Contemporánea, and his poster for Jorge Romero Brest, Homenaje, and even his interest in you see in this sort of like surrealist imagery in the center for an exhibition, an advertisement for one of his exhibitions. You see that he's not really afraid to even push himself out of the box of what he has done in the past. He's constantly evolving, and I think that is one of the really important points to really think about when reflecting on his career, is that as the years are changing, he's also changing. Even though he's very much rooted in his own world, which he has created, he still is not afraid to experiment, to think about new images, new motifs, new aesthetics, and to employ them to be relevant. I think he always knew how to represent the pulse of contemporary society, and that is one of his great gifts. And so I just want to finish up by speaking about 2 of my favorite projects, which is his architecture, which he, worked on a group of architectural projects, not that many in comparison to all of the other things that he produced throughout his career, but I think they're so wild and so incredible. I mean, when you see the examples, they just scream, I'm here, I want to be present, and also I want you to engage with me. And also I think what's really interesting about his architecture is that, it wasn't meant to blend in. I don't think anything that he was creating was meant to blend in, but in architecture, he really defied all of the rules in a way that was so fantastic and that was really in great conversation with the conversations that were happening in architecture, that was really, pushing away from the international style, modernism, and really moving towards a postmodern aesthetic where, less was a bore. And he really took that spirit into the design of his architecture. This is an example of a house that was commissioned by Jorge Romero Brest and Marta Botempi, and it received substantial attention and was exhibited. Actually, drawings for it were exhibited at the Museum of Modern Art in 1979 in the exhibition Transformations in Modern Architecture, and it's just like a really it's one of my favorite buildings. And also, just to end with the fact that he hasn't stopped, and I love that this is one of his most recent designs. This is called Casa Neptuna. It was commissioned by Fundación Amoedo, and it's for an artist residency program. And I think it's really interesting that the Fundación commissioned him to create this building, because I think what he put into it was he produced a space, or he designed a space that was meant to incite inspiration and joy. And I think at the root of his career, of his practice, that's really what he was trying to provide, not just to artists and cultural figures, but to the everyday person. And so I thought it was really fitting that he would be the person to create this space for inspiration for other artists. So I'll end there. Thank you.
All right. Well, thanks again to Nicole for putting this all together, curating the evening, and inviting us to participate. And thanks, Christina. That was really amazing to see it all. I had never seen that last one. The architecture is very exciting to me. So we were able, based on Edgardo's work, to create like a graphics kit that folks can use to collage or use in different ways. So we wanted to share a little bit about how we chose the images that we put in that, what you could use it for, and just kind of coming from our perspective as who we are as a studio, what influenced how we chose those things.
I want to say thank you, Nicole, for inviting us to do this. I want to start saying that my knowledge about Edgardo before this invitation, it was very small. I knew about his work when I was in college, but yeah, once I access to the archive and I start seeing the physical pieces of his work and the amount of work, how you say, was so kind of super overwhelming in a very inspiring way, because it was so much work. So being able to navigate this selection, it was a hard task to make this selection. Very challenging to make a selection that represent in a very truthful way what Edgardo's work it is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we can start. We have two versions. We are a risograph printing studio, among other things. And so that's a method of printing. If you're not familiar with, that's similar as a cross between essentially screen printing and copy machine. So it prints with these very saturated colors. But one limitation to the actual printing of it is that to print something in full color is a difficult process, very time consuming and costly. So we made two versions, especially for those who couldn't come by the archive, the printed and the PDF version. So we can start to show a little bit of the PDF version and explain as we go how we did that. So the kit consists of these different graphic elements that we pulled out of Edgardo's work. So you can see kind of based on Christina's presentation, you might recognize some of the different elements that were pulled out. In addition to pulling some of his, Gonzalo designed a few pieces that were kind of related to or inspired by Edgardo's work. And again, as we were doing this, thinking through like the different ways that someone might use this kit. So many of those repeated motifs that you said, like the butterfly, the head, are in this, especially also his use of typography and his repeated name as well. Oops.
I can go. I can do it.
Okay.
But yeah, the selection of icons, it was, and like designs, it was trying to take elements from different eras, different decades, that represent different, or like, that represent like Edgardo's sensitivity to like to abstraction, like the form and shapes that he has, how he like was able to compress these elements in a very simple way for like communicate different ideas, different like concepts. But yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And so we put you can see through this that some of the things are taken from his graphic design work. There's also some elements that we took from his work of like objects and architecture. So some of this is like some of those home objects that he had, but kind of translated into like a graphic representation. So trying to pull from all the great breadth of work that he had and translate into digital form. And so we imagine that someone could use this kit in a variety of different ways. Again, his work like very much inspires play, and even through your interview, I think he was very adamant about how he wanted his work to make others feel as well, the sense of play, the sense of love, a happiness.
Happiness. Like a search of like beauty and happiness. It was like very strong in his work. And very inspiring because that was like basically that connects all the body of work through the years, even like the sculpture, the clothing, the architecture, scenography. If you look back to his work, it's like basically it's all connected. Like the architectural pieces are like it's art, you know. It's like, for me, it's not it's architecture, but it's like more like a body of work. Yeah.
Yeah, so using those pieces then, we wanted to inspire people to kind of isolate the different pieces, play with them, overlap them. Even in a lot of his work, he uses collage and isolating different elements outside of their initial context. So by doing this, we hope that folks will, especially in the physical form, take the different things, you can cut them out, you can make your own poster, hopefully make a postcard to a friend, perhaps. I imagine magnets on a fridge. Michelle. Yeah, different ways to use it, and just really play with the different elements, and kind of, it's a more tactile way, I think, to get to know Edgardo's work by like actually physically engaging with the work itself and rearranging them in new ways. And then with the digital version, yeah, do you want to say a bit about how people could use that?
So the digital version is also, you can use as you want. It's like a PDF file that you can access through like other Adobe versions, or just like do like copy paste and use it. But there are, if you're familiar with like Adobe software, you can be
with referencing where it came from.
Exactly. It's only for personal use.
Yeah.
Personal, non-commercial use, exclusively. But yeah, it's like also like I want to say that it feels a little bit intimidating at first, because like manipulating images from very big artists, yeah, we went through a process of like getting the permission to use this, and it was like, okay, but how we can manipulate these images. I usually, in my process, I destroy images, you know, I kind of like, I create them and then I like modify in a way that are like, it changed so much, but like in this process, it was like, I need to look back and like be careful, but yeah. And because it's like the interpretation of like other artists' work. So it's like very interesting process for myself to, in a like more intangible way of collaborating somehow. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So
Yes.
we are excited to see how people will use things and hope that if you play with it, that you'll share the way that you've used his work in new contexts, which again is what so much of his work does, is taking these motifs and reconceptualizing them in different ways. So yeah, excited to see what comes out of it. And the last piece about it being with Riso, printing the physical copy on Riso, so with that it's much easier to print just one color, which was a little bit scary for us too, going through Edgardo's work, which is so colorful and really uses color. But we thought that it was really interesting to see these things in one color, since he draws so much on this very like pop art graphic contrast, uses a lot of contrast. So keeping it on one color, you're really able to focus on the image itself rather than all the color around it. So combining those different colors per pages in different ways as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Feel free to grab one here if you want to take a look now.
Or two.
On the table. Oh, two. Yeah.
Yeah.
There are many.
Yeah. So.
Thank you.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Well, thank you very much for your presentations. I have two questions, one for you and one for Secret Riso. So you said that ISLAA had donated a few posters to Cooper. Where is the archive? And that's also to you. Like, were you able to access like the physical materials, or was it all digitized? Is the archive here with ISLAA, or is it Edgardo's? Still, I'd like to know a little bit more about that. And then my other question is, what was Edgardo's feedback on your production?
We haven't. Maybe Nicole knows a little bit more. Yeah.
Sorry, this is a question for me. Edgardo hasn't actually seen the kit yet because I haven't been able to share the PDF with him. So I'm excited to see what he responds as well. He was really excited about the prospect of people engaging with his practice in this way. And I think that that's so evident already in his kind of openness to like home goods or things like this that invite a kind of scenography in space in a similar way. So I think in some sense this is an extension of that practice.
And in terms of Cooper Hewitt, we don't have archival materials, but we have those 24 posters, and they're in our permanent collection. And, you know, if you're interested in making an appointment to see them for study, you can. Cooper Hewitt is the Smithsonian Design Museum, free and open to the public to research and study our works. That's the whole point. So.
Yeah. I want to add that the archive is a collection of like publications, like ephemera, and magazines, like advertisings. There's a few magazines that are like the lifestyle magazines from Argentina in the 60s and 70s are like very cool to see. Yeah.
My first question is, so I'm a writer and I'm also very passionate about visual arts in general and graphic design. I do some visual art but not graphic design, and I have terrible I'm terrible with InDesign or any of those computer tools, but I do collaborate a lot with people, and sometimes I find that even being a writer, sometimes there's some gaps in communication with trying to get to a point that's like I'm expressing where I'm trying to get to with my ideas, and the person's able to translate that into visual works. So in your experience, do you have any advice for, just enhancing, I guess, the communication process between people that are involved in the graphic design process, but not necessarily creating it, but are trying, communicate an idea?
Yeah, I will say that's like the more challenging process always in like design, art, any kind of job. But I will say that in that process of communication, try to be the most detailed possible, from like trying to express abstract ideas or concepts in a more like approachable way, with examples, references, what you like from like things that you have in your house, or like things that you don't think much about it, like that. Yeah, maybe those are gonna speak more than from like what you want to somebody that's gonna make a visual piece of it. Or
Yeah, thank you.
I'm just thinking too about Edgardo's work then, like that he expressed, like you were saying, kind of this ethos that he wanted to express in so many different ways, so again, like as you're trying to decide what you want to communicate, like it could be even a song, like all these different ways that you communicate. Somebody who is designing or making something can use all of that to kind of get the feeling and what you want to do, because it's not just translating a visual,
Yeah, for
it's
sure.
translating that feeling.
Yeah, thanks. That's great advice. And my question for you, as someone that, has successfully gotten to the position of bringing more awareness to Latin American art, what advice would you give for people that, are trying to get involved, not necessarily have a background in art education? What do you think, are some things that nowadays stand out in job applications when, people are applying for curatorial work, or just any type of involvement with the arts from the perspective of trying to promote other people's works, not only their own?
Yeah, good question. I don't know if I'm successful yet. We'll see in like 15 years when people are looking back at what I've acquired. I hope they think I'm successful. I think a few things. One is that when you're working in a field or in an area that hasn't had the type of recognition or the type of attention that you think is important, or perhaps hasn't hit, the mainstream, I don't like to use that word, but, museum collections or certain type of academic publications, you really have to be almost like dogged in your commitment to the field and to the work, like, because it's one thing when you are working within a culturally specific institution, or even within like a very specific type of organization where everyone speaks the same language. And it's very different when you are in another situation where you have to translate that work for a much broader audience that doesn't know anything about what you're talking about, that might question the validity of it, or might even think like, why is it worthwhile? Like, how is it interesting? And one of the things that I have, done a lot of is putting designers and artists that I think are really pivotal to not just the study and the exploration of design from the Americas, but really putting them in conversation with people from around the world. Because when you begin to do that, you begin to break up like these silos that institutions, just like automatically create. And like, I understand why they do it to a certain extent, but that's not how the world works, right? We're not in the 21st century, we are not siloed. You know, we have access to so many things, and certainly for hundreds of years before that, people have been influenced by people and things and places outside of their locality. So one thing is that you have to be very determined, even when people are like, eh. And the other thing that I think I look for when I'm reading applications is writing. This is going to sound so teacherly, but I think it's really important when you're working in a museum in particular, or any type of like arts education, that you know how to express yourself. And whether that be verbal expression or writing, that is so critical, because at the end of the day, your work is to benefit the public in some way. And when you lose that context, I think then it becomes difficult. So like being able to talk about, you know, this poster here in a very accessible way is something that I think, while, you know, I'm in a doctoral program, like I know all about like the importance of writing in an academic way, but writing and communicating in an accessible way, if you want to serve the public, I think is really paramount in the way in which you approach your work, and something that I think is really important. You know, can you engage in a way that brings people in, that makes people think like, oh yeah, I didn't think that was interesting, but like you just talked to me about it for 5 minutes and I'm hooked. I think that is the role of the museum today, and something that's a lot of times we lose sight of, because, you know, we're so caught up in being a museum that we forget about why the institution even exists, and that's for the greater public good.
So back to Edgardo. Thank you very much for putting this conversation together and for your presentations. Where do you think Edgardo fits in the global scope that you were just beginning to describe within the museum, with a more open world? The history here is that, for those that do not know me, I'm Ariel Isaacs. I'm the founder of ISLAA. Edgardo has been a friend for a very long time. You saw one of the houses that he constructed for Romero Brest. He lives in a house like this, outside of Buenos Aires, 2 hours, in a small town called La Plata, or a small city. And all his graphic artwork, well, the posters were sitting there for a long period of time. In 2013, I was the founder of a non-for-profit in Argentina to recover design, and Edgardo was very kind to allow us to go to his home and pick everything up. So there's a foundation in Buenos Aires that has the archives. ISLAA has some of the archives. There's a digital archive, but all the graphic artworks, around 1,500, Natasha can correct me, it's 1,500 to 2,000. They're sitting here in New York, and we started a process of asking museums if they would be interested in receiving gifts. And we have a beautiful conversation. 24 of these artworks went to Cooper Hewitt, but many other museums in the United States, including the Met, MoMA, Denver, museum universities like Rutgers, they all took in Edgardo. And here's the question. This is recent. This happened in the past 5 years. Edgardo was discovered in 1963 by a German magazine that published him as one of the, this is in the archives, you can see the magazine, 2 magazines actually, one of the greatest artists, designers of the 60s. But it took us, 50 or 60 years to get some recognition here. MoMA had acquire in 1980s his works, but they were never shown until 2 years ago, that they were on the 3rd floor at MoMA. And now museums are starting to discover Edgardo and many others. So I wanted to hear a little bit your experience and share, and what can we do better, and what else can we do? And do you have more room for other artists, or for more of Giménez?
Always have room for other artists. I was going through the book. Nicole sent me a PDF of it, and I was thinking about all of the institutions that have gotten his work, because I think it's sort of very smart, like what has happened in the last few years, which is that it's one thing to give, but then it's another thing for curators and students and professors and people who are writing about the work to have some fundamental resources to begin to connect the dots. And I think what has been done really smartly by ISLAA is that you provided these generous gifts, but now you have a book. And the book is really, and not to say that there haven't been other publications and other magazines and other write-ups about Edgardo, because there have been many. But unfortunately, in the United States, if it's like not published in English, it becomes a problem. Like, people don't read. I'm sorry, but people don't read. And so what I think that the publication does in a really great way is that you have a lot of images, right? But then it's interspersed with, very focused, very interesting essays that that lay the groundwork for the next generation of, curators, even designers, students, educators, to begin to really connect the dots with Edgardo and everything else that's going on throughout his lifetime and his production. And I think that's the super exciting thing about, and it's also the sad thing, right? Because it really is unfortunate that so many artists and designers of the region have not gotten the type of attention that they deserve in the United States and in large institutions throughout the world. And it's unfortunate that in many instances, their work has been thought of as second-rate to artists and designers in the United States and architects in the United States and Europe, which I think is unfortunate for so many reasons, but mostly for the reason in that we have been repeating a narrative that is incomplete. And I think with this book and with these gifts, I hope people will begin to use this as a opportunity to begin to connect dots that they never had before. I think that's really what is the most exciting and what's to come. I think all of this work has been done in the last 5 years, but what will become in the next 5 to 10 years, I think that is what will likely speak volumes. And I think the way in which we speak about Edgardo Giménez and many others will begin to really change. At least I hope that. For instance, it's very rare. It's very, very rare to have any type of design wrapped into an art history course, or for that to be part of a survey. I work at a museum. I'm sometimes asked to do a survey class, that talks about all of Latin America. It's like, in 3 hours, can you tell us the full history of Latin American design for our students? And I include Edgardo, and I include many, many other people. And And everyone is like, I've never heard of any of these people. I've never heard of any of these people. And I've worked at Cooper Hewitt now for it'll be almost 7 years. And it's only in the last 3 years that I was invited we have a connection with the Parsons program, that I was invited to join the program, to join as a guest speaker for their survey course. And really it happened because the students revolted and said, we want to have more diversity in the type of design history that's, taught to us. So I hope that with the collection not just going to big museums, but also university museums, which I think is so, so key, because university museums are the ones that really work with the students the most. I remember when I was an undergraduate, I didn't have a university museum, but we often went to the university museums around, close to where my college was, and it was there that we got to get so close to work in a way that you can't always get at museums. Sometimes you can if you have like a special, visit that's scheduled, but it's hard. And so having that variety is, I think, really fundamental. And I think, I imagine, I hope that in the next 5 to 10 years, the way we talk about Edgardo will be completely different. It'll be transformed.
That was wonderful. I think that the takeaway here, again, is that the book is a hit. You should all read it. Thank you all again for joining us tonight. I think we should continue at a reception, continue with some more intimate conversation and questions, but a last round of applause for our wonderful presenters tonight.